Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025, and today we're talking about winter gardening on both the infrastructural side and the deliciousness side. And we get an interesting question about how fast can you turn fresh potatoes to seed potatoes? Like, can you do it in the same season? We'll find out. So let's do it. All right, how awesome was that version of the theme song? That was Nikos Saropoulos, notably a Patreon member. We will put links to Nikos' work in the show notes or go to nikospiano.com. And musicians, remember to get your theme songs in to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com. Very cool stuff to hear those covers. And we will do that all through September, unless you keep sending them. We'll just keep going. But really appreciate that. All right, happy Wednesday to you all. And look at us, we are already midweek, just like that. So we got a trickle of rain yesterday, which was cute. My precip app says it was 1/4 of an inch. And I mean, honestly, I was in it. That feels a little hopeful, but I'll take whatever we can get. My friend Diego Footer from moderngrower.co sent me some Sumi Soaker line to play with this last week. And I'm not really ready to port on this yet, but I did get it pieced together on Labor Day with some of the irrigation pieces I had laying around. Kind of had to finagle some stuff, but I made it work. And it is a very cool system. Basically, you know how your drip tape, if it gets a hole in it, will just like spray straight up in the air. Well, that is basically the idea here with the Sumi Soaker, but it's intentional. Like, it all just kind of sprays out of these little holes in a really uniform fashion. And I'm going to play with it a lot more this season, as much as I can. And right now we don't have any rain, so it's lots of opportunities. And anyway, I'm going to play with it a lot throughout the rest of the season before I really can report on it. But I could also see it being not just good for, a good tool for irrigation, but for misting the lettuce in the summer as well. Anyway, more on that soon. I also, this past weekend, got my sweet onion seed saved and stored away. I had to kind of break it out of the chaff. All right, there's sweet onion seed in this chaff. I'm going to separate it with a fan and see what we got. Been squirreling away seeds from my topper popper peppers as well. And also we have this one tomato. I think it's the cherry bomb. But anyway, it is the sweetest red cherry tomato I've had in years. So saving seed on that one, just why not? Basically, I'm going through those peppers and those tomatoes and just being like, this tastes good, and I'm saving seed on it. That's my strategy. The winter squash is pretty much all out of the milpa patch. It's honestly quite the mix. Maybe not the best mix. Maybe need to tone it down a hair with the next year on varieties, but more to report on the milpa patch soon. Anyway, still plenty to be done here in September, as always, and getting ready to start loading up on cover crops and filling the tunnels up with winter produce. You're always such a party, September. Appreciate you. Okay, so in that vein, let's talk about winter gardening for a bit. In this segment, I'll talk about the crops that we do well and that we like to grow and how to think about winter gardening. And then in the third segment, we'll break down some of the infrastructure considerations. So yeah, first, let's talk about what crops you can or we can still potentially start and produce here, at least in the whatever Zone 6B, Kentucky, that will last all winter, so long as you have the infrastructure to do it. The one big thing everyone needs to understand about winter gardening is that it's not as much about actively growing food as much as it is about getting crops up to a certain size as much as possible and then keeping them alive through the cold. In other words, it's less winter growing and more winter keeping stuff alive, or winter holding, as I like to say. So your goal is to basically grow a crop pretty well to maturity and then keep it covered and protected throughout the winter, because although sure, stuff will grow a little bit, especially after the winter solstice when the sun and warmth begins to return a little bit. For the most part, however, growth just completely arrests from, basically like November to February, at least here in Kentucky. If you're in Florida or somewhere tropical, of course, and of course in the Southern Hemisphere, that may be prime growing season. But for us, it's kind of prime stopping season. Now, obviously, infrastructure will play a big role here because, some of you may be like, dude, the ground is completely frozen, solid until March, in which case there will be no real field grown option for you. So for me, I like to get everything I plan to harvest up until like February into the ground by October 1st and almost all of that is going into the tunnel. We do plant stuff through September into the fields and then keep it covered as long as we can. But once you get to mid-December, we're getting into consistently like mid-20s. It's really hard to keep stuff alive in the field. Anyway, what crops are the best for cold weather production? For me, lettuce is king year-round. It's fast to grow, easy to harvest and clean, and most of all, easy to sell. Makes a decent profit. Most lettuces will do well in the winter. However, it is worth getting a variety of lettuces planted to ensure, the best chance of survival in case of pests or diseases or whatever. Fungal diseases are really common in the winter time. Muir and Salanova varieties are always great. Those are always last pretty well in the cold. Winter Density is a solid one as well. I also like Cherokee, red romaine, and blue rock romaine in the winter as head lettuces. Then the next crop on my list is spinach. The Savoyd types, the crinkly ones, tend to be a little bit more cold hardy than the smooth spinaches, but both can survive pretty well under the right protection. Kale is another great winter producer. The height of this one makes this crop a little bit more challenging for the cold. Shorter stuff tends to stay more protected because it's closer to the big warm earth. But the tall stuff gets a lot more exposure to the cold. But I find I can get the plants pretty tall and bushy and then harvest quite a lot from them all winter. All three of these crops should be covered with extra row cover, even in the tunnel. When temperatures go below 25 degrees Fahrenheit, at least, that's like roughly -4 Celsius. Now, there are also a bunch of cold hardy greens that can be fun, like Minutina and Claytonia and Mosh. However, these are largely just specialty items that you will either have to already have a market for, like chefs, or be prepared to hand sell them, maybe even give out some samples. If you're just growing these for yourself, of course, then salads all day and all winter long. Snag some of that chickweed out there too, because I know you have it and it's delicious to add to the mix. Things like carrots are definitely one you can grow if you get them started early enough. I've said this recently, but we will often, get a round of carrots into the tunnels around or before October 1st for January harvests. In the field, it's a little tougher if things freeze where you are. I've seen where people will also grow them late in the summer and then mulch over them for the winter, just pulling the mulch back as they need to and then harvesting, which is fine too. And, if your climate is not such that it just gets frozen solid. I don't love harvesting carrots out of the cold, moist soil of the winter, if I'm being entirely honest. So I'm not likely to do that in the winter in the field as much, but it is possible. Cilantro is another great winter crop. It is surprisingly hardy, so long as you have it under some amount of protection. Parsley as well. Also, it does fairly well, though after some amount of freezes and thaws, it gets a little funky. Anyway, winter market farming, it's often less about like fresh crops, although that's certainly a part of it. It's less about those than it is about like having some fresh crops to supplement the root and storage crops that you grew over the summer to have a full market table. In other words, very few professional growers in a moderately cold climate are relying solely on cold weather fresh crops. Storage crops are really the key there. So yeah, that's the bulk of what we actively grow, but there are other options out there, and commenters can feel free to list the ones that I've missed for discussion on Friday. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll take a question about flipping new potatoes to seed potatoes presto changeo, BRB. Or it could be like pesto changeo, because pesto is pretty good with potatoes, like a potato salad with pesto. Sounds good.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Tyler Quattrochi, who writes, quote, Jesse, hope to send a video soon, but I'm ashamed of the lack of cultivation right now. Anyway, I have a question about potatoes. I have been trying for 3 years now to get a double harvest. The seed potatoes get too gnarly if I only have one cycle per year. Long question short, what's the best way to harvest new potatoes and get them sprouted and in the ground again? This year, I picked them and put them right back in fabric pots. Some did sprout in under 3 weeks, but only about 10%. I suspected the high July temps were a problem, so I checked them and brought them inside in a tray where it is cooler and only more potato has sprouted. I assume that means one more potato has sprouted. But anyway, end quote. Thanks, Tyler. And I should say, because I keep forgetting, friends, please keep those, sending those 20-second videos of your farm and gardens just all year. We don't have a specific theme this month as we focus on the theme songs, and keep those coming. But we've got a great theme for next month, and we will still always want to see those gardens, even if they're a little weedy, whatever you've got going on. I mean, sometimes, especially if they're a little weedy, that's helpful. I think it's just the way it goes sometimes. Good to know that other people struggle too. Always feel free to shoot those 20-second clips over to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. We appreciate it. All right. So to your question here, Tyler, it's very interesting. Essentially, it is, after I harvest a crop of potatoes, how do I make them viable for replanting that same season in a way that gets better germination? Well, part of this will rely on you having a long enough season to do so, because, at least for us, potatoes come out around late June or July, which is about as late as I would probably plant potatoes here in Zone 6B, unless they are going into the tunnel. Of course, shorter season potatoes, you could maybe get away with, planting a new round in July. It's just risky. Anyway, the thing that your attempt here is missing is simply time, and maybe a little cold, but let's stick with time for the moment. Basically, potatoes need a curing stage to heal their skins, then they need their dormancy to be broken. How long this takes depends on the variety, but let's just say arbitrarily that most seed potatoes will not sprout until 4 to 6 weeks after harvest in most conditions. So effectively, you harvest the potatoes and cure them in cellar temperatures with high humidity for 2 weeks first. Next, what I've seen recommended, though I have not tried this myself, and it may be dependent on the variety still, is to refrigerate those for about 2 more weeks to replicate the cold, then take them out and put them into warmer temperatures and higher humidity to chit them, to get them to sprout a little bit, and then plant them again. Effectively, going straight from harvest to planting, again, will skip a whole essential step in their physiology and how they work. Now, the potatoes may still eventually sprout if you just pop them into the soil because, well, they cure in the ground and then eventually will break their own, dormancy on their own terms. But by and large, potatoes need that break to heal. Then they go dormant, and then you wake them up with the cold, and then they can sprout. I guess you could think of this how it would happen in the wild. Potato plants would grow, then so as not to waste their progeny, they developed a mechanism to get them through the winter before they sprout again, right? You don't want to sprout immediately, because then you're just going to die in the winter. That would be like they're curing and then dormancy. So after the cold period, which you would replicate with a fridge, they know it's safe to rock and roll. Now, there is also the question of if this is even a good idea in terms of disease propagation and yield. This is a little harder to say. If you did have really great production on the first round and no disease issues, then maybe so. Maybe they would be fine. But also, seed potatoes are generally checked for disease resistant before they're sold to you, so thus the elevated price. So I guess the short answer is yes, it could work under the right conditions, but maybe the better approach is just planning to plant some of your potatoes later in the year and improving storage conditions, so you're growing that second round is not you're not dealing with gnarly seed potatoes as you suggested. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, how about we talk more winter production stuff? Be right back. All right, so if you're serious about producing crops all winter and you are in a place that gets somewhat legit cold, then you're going to need some assistance. And by that, I mean some infrastructure. Because although, sure, spinach and mosh and those sorts of things will survive all winter in many regions, that doesn't mean they will be super edible or good enough looking to sell, or that also doesn't mean they won't be covered in several inches of ice or snow or whatever. So on the simple, small scale side, you can build a few cold frames. These are, cold frames are just tiny greenhouses, and they are an ancient approach, in fact, to year-round food production, dating back to at least ancient Roman Greece, where emperors demanded things like cucumbers year-round. So gardeners fashioned frames that were heated with things like compost and covered with thin sheets of silica to replicate what we call glass or plastic. You, however, can use windows or glass doors or whatever, or frames with plastic or whatever makes the most sense for you, and make them sort of south-facing, in-ground cold frames, little boxes, and grow quite a bit of food that way. Definitely on a family-size scale, but the Parisian market gardeners used to do this on a very large scale. Now, Water and ventilation should all be considered as well. So look at the designs online and make sure to take those little details into consideration. Also, don't use super old windows that may have lead paint or just paint falling into your greens. Now, the next option up to me is not low tunnels, though I will discuss those in a minute. Rather, I think there's hardly a better investment than covered space that you can walk around in, such as a caterpillar tunnel, sometimes called a cat tunnel, or additionally, something bigger like a high tunnel. Cat tunnels are essentially easy up high tunnels. They are shorter and not as sturdy, but they are also semi-mobile and much cheaper than a traditional high tunnel. The value of cat tunnels is season extension. In fact, in milder climates, all you need to grow year-round is a cat tunnel. You can get them from a few different places as well. I have not tried all the different producers, so I'm not going to recommend one place over another necessarily. Shop around, but also ask around. Ask other farmers what they use. Don't just go buy some random thing on Amazon, though. That's a good way to just waste some money. Go to one of the trusted grower sources for high tunnels and caterpillar tunnel stuff, and the little extra money that you'll spend there will go a long way. These tunnels come in many different sizes and can be put together for relatively cheap. Now, you will want to get wind bracing and secure them very well, and I don't generally recommend getting something like a cat tunnel in a high wind prone area. I also recommend you get the Quonset and not the Gothic style, only because I have seen a lot of the Gothic ones crumble in high winds. To me, there's almost no better investment, though, in terms of profitability than covered growing space. It pays for itself really fast because you can grow all winter. You can grow really high density stuff. The food that grows under a tunnel tends to be very lush and green and delicious. Now, on a small scale, especially in areas where stuff doesn't really readily get covered in snow or freeze to the ground, low tunnels, basically hoops covered in plastic or row cover, can work, but wind tends to tear those apart quite rapidly in the field, so make sure to secure them very well. Also, getting into them physically on extra cold days is quite tough, and I don't know if you've ever crawled around in cold soil on a cold winter day trying to harvest, but it's not exactly the things dreams are made of, unless those dreams are nightmares, in which case carry on. Row cover at the R30 level is pretty essential to me. Even if you're growing inside of a tunnel, you will want to add a layer of row cover for nights below 25 degrees in general, or that would be like -4-ish Celsius. Obviously, a high tunnel is a great, if not the greatest investment for winter production. It's not clear the fate of the NRCS EQIP high tunnel program going forward that has funded sometimes entirely high tunnels for growers for many years, but if that program or similar one is available to you, it is definitely worth applying. Worst case scenario, you have to pay a few $1,000s for a $20,000 or $40,000 structure that will just produce endlessly. You will find that almost every professional farm will use a large covered space like a high tunnel or cat tunnel eventually, just to extend the growing season in both directions and kind of level the workload a little bit. Now, external heating and all of that stuff is another level that, to be honest, won't be necessary for many of us. You will get there if you need to get there. You would be amazed at what a little sunlight and some clear plastic or glass will do for you. Just be advised, I see people try to use all sorts of random things to build tunnels and low tunnels only to have ultimately wasted their time and money and materials as they are smashed by wind or snow or ice or some combination. Save your time and money and stick with the experts on this one if you can, unless you are good at building stuff, in which case that's fine. You may understand all the structural needs. Any old clear plastic won't work, though. Make sure that it is UV treated and all those things. Most PVC is not UV treated either, so not great for hoops, etc., etc. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up there for now. But first, we're going to get one last word, poignantly in this case, from our friends at Rimmel Greenhouses. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Nailed that one. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also to Nikos for the theme today. That was awesome. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of September, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Chapman Beekman. That's very novelistic. Chapman Beekman. That's great. Love it. All right. So as you will remember, our hiker, Pat, is fuming mad about something that happened at work and has decided to go take a hike in the forest behind the city where Pat resides, a hike that Pat has taken, countless times. This time, however, as Pat is traversing, the main trail, Pat notices a trail that they'd never seen before. So it's just sort of like off to the left, kind of, unassuming. This is not super uncommon. Sometimes deer trails are less obvious in the summer when all the foliage is on the trees. And as it starts to drop back, new paths are revealed a little bit more. Usually Pat would just kind of ignore this trail, like who wants to hike, where deer are hiking. I mean, there's really not a lot of incentive to hike a deer trail, but this time, however, Pat decides to extend this particular hike a little bit and follow it because, well, something about this path is calling to Pat. It's not quite clear what that is exactly, a smell maybe, or a feeling. So Pat steps off the main path and starts down the hidden one. Where does it lead? That is for tomorrow. I'll go take a hike. I don't know about that one. I'll think on it. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.